Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. Breathless. The morning mist clung to the sprawling forests surrounding Blackwood Manor, an imposing estate nestled deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as a soft chorus of birdsong attempted in vain to pierce the unnatural stillness inside the manor. It was supposed to be a weekend escape, an elite private retreat offering respite from the chaos of the world. A chance for the guests to unwind, to talk, to laugh, and to reconnect. Yet this morning, nothing was as it should be. Everyone at Blackwood Manor woke up breathless. It began with a silent shudder that rippled through the grand hall as the first rays of dawn slipped through stained glass windows. One by one, the guests stirred in their rooms, eyes fluttering open to a day that felt impossibly heavy without reason. As they rose from their beds, an unsettling realization dawned on them: they could not speak. Not a word, not a whisper, no matter how frantically they tried. Their voices were imprisoned within their throats, silenced in a terrifying void. Claire Emerson, a renowned psychologist specializing in trauma, was among the first to recognize the horror. She pushed herself up from the plush mattress of her room and clawed at her throat, panic setting in as her attempts to cry out were met with nothing but a strangled, desperate silence. Her heart pounded as she realized she was not alone. Down the hall, in the study, Richard Hale, a celebrated mystery novelist, banged his fists on the polished oak desk, his face drained of color. Across the manor, old Mrs. Whitmore, the estate's matronly housekeeper, sat motionless in her chair, wide-eyed and mute, her knitting needles idle in her hands. The guests and staff were trapped in an eerie, unspoken quiet. But it was not just their ability to speak that had forsaken them. When someone tried to open the heavy wrought iron gates outside, they found them immovable, as if fused to the earth. The ancient door locks, with their intricate patterns and heavy latches, no longer yielded. The cars parked in the driveway were perfectly intact but refused to budge an inch. The entire estate was sealed tight, a giant cage hemming in its frightened occupants. Claire, ever the leader in crisis, began to write furiously on the large whiteboard in the main hallway, demanding eye contact to communicate. Her first message was simple: "Can anyone move the doors?" Richard shook his head, his face contorted with fear. No one could leave. 10 people, all of them strangers from various walks of life invited to this retreat by the elusive host known only as Mr. Blackwood, were now muted prisoners in a sprawling mansion surrounded by dense woods that seemed to stretch endlessly. Their phones had no signal. Their watches and devices had inexplicably stopped working at precisely 6:30 in the morning, just before they noticed their voices were gone. Hours passed. Panic turned to hysteria, marked by frantic gesturing and desperate attempts at communication. Claire calmed herself and the others, urging them to remain calm through deliberate and organized note-taking. But the mystery gnawed at her mind. Why had they all been targeted for this strange silence and captivity? And more chillingly, who or what was behind it? They knew the retreat was crafted by a man of resources and secrets. Invitations had arrived by courier weeks ago, unsigned except for the cryptic signature, M. Blackwood. The retreat promised luxury and anonymity the guests certainly were now thirsting for, but not like this. The walls held secrets, and the silence kept the secrets alive. Claire assembled the guests in the drawing room, a vast space adorned with ancient tapestries and candle-lit sconces, attempting to piece together a plan using their collective knowledge. There was John Harris, a tech executive who had provided the wireless internet for the manor but had no signal now. Amelia Cross, an investigative journalist recently working on exposing corporate crimes. David and Lena Miller, a married couple who managed a chain of security firms. Elena Vasquez, a linguistics professor with experience in nonverbal communication, and Dr. Ian Price, a reclusive neurologist whose nervousness was palpable. Despite their skills, none offered immediate answers. The manor was their prison, and the silence their chains. The first day passed in heated scribbles and restless pacing. At night, the house creaked and groaned as if breathing, the wooden beams moaning with the wind, or perhaps with something more sinister. Claustrophobia gnawed at their resolve. On the second morning, a discovery shook the fragile calm. Amelia found a hidden compartment beneath the desk in the library. Inside, a leather-bound journal, brittle with age and embossed with strange symbols, lay waiting unmoved by time's decay. It was in an archaic script, but Alina's knowledge of ancient languages allowed her to make sense of fragments. Its title translated to, "The Breathless Curse." The journal belonged to the manor's original owner, an occultist named Elias Blackwood who had vanished mysteriously nearly 2 centuries ago. Rumors whispered that he had dabbled in forbidden rituals, trying to transcend the limits of the human body and voice, to trap souls within silence. Alina's face paled when she read aloud, through gestures and written words, that the curse was said to punish those who abused speech, those who used words to deceive, manipulate, or spread darkness. The curse stripped their voices, binding them within the estate until understanding and repentance were found. The implication was clear. The guests at Blackwood Manor had been chosen not randomly but deliberately, seemingly judged by the unseen hand of Elias Blackwood's lingering spirit, or something he summoned, to face a reckoning. The group dissected their own pasts in solemn silence, the journal's gravity weighing on their souls. John had spearheaded unscrupulous data mining projects prying into private lives. Amelia had recently published an exposé whose insights had destroyed reputations but potentially caused collateral damage. David and Lena had turned a blind eye to unethical practices in their security contracts. Claire wondered if the trauma patients she helped had truly healed or merely masked the shadows beneath. Voices were silent, but guilt spoke loudly. That night, the manor seemed to pulse with unseen life. The guests took turns keeping watch in the flickering candlelight, the shadows dancing on the walls like specters awaiting judgment. Dreams came dense with whispers and half-heard warnings, as if the house itself tried to communicate through sleep. On the third day, Elena discovered a hidden message scrawled faintly beneath the journal's cover. It was a riddle disguised in ancient cipher. "Speak not with tongues, but with the heart. The binds may break when truth imparts." It was an echo of hope. The guests realized their silence was not simply a punishment but a challenge. They had to communicate their inner truths, not words uttered, but truths lived and understood. In their frantic note-passing and gestures, desperation gave way to vulnerability. Confessions unfolded on paper. John wrote about the precious privacy he had stolen in his quest for power. Amelia admitted she had manipulated sources to push stories that favored her narrative alone. The Millers revealed their compliance in covering up abuses they suspected but chose to ignore. Claire confessed her own fears and failures in truly saving her patients. All nursed deep wounds of regret. A strange sensation began to build in the manor, subtle at first, a warmth in the air, as if their collective honesty breathed life into the heavy silence. In the twilight of the third evening, something shifted. The guests, seated in a circle by flickering lantern light, suddenly felt a whisper of wind stir the curtains, the first sound in days. It was faint, almost imagined, yet unmistakable. For a moment, eyes locked in unspoken understanding. With cautious courage, they attempted the impossible. Willing themselves to whisper a single word, barely a breath escaping trembling lips. And then another. The words were fragile and experimental, but they grew stronger with each attempt. Word by word, syllable by syllable, voices returned, weak yet undeniable. The doors creaked softly and then sighed, loosening their ancient grip. The gates began to shift on rusted hinges, a slow motion that heralded freedom rather than captivity. But relief was not yet theirs fully. When the doors fell open, a shadow moved beyond the threshold, a figure draped in a dark cloak, face obscured but exuding a presence that chilled to the bone. The visitors froze, their newly regained voices caught in their throats. The figure's slow, deliberate steps echoed through the entry hall, a spectral dance between worlds. Then a voice, hoarse and ancient, filled the void. You have learned the weight of silence and the strength of truth. Yet the journey is not over. Before them lay a leather-bound book, larger and older than the first, resting on a carved pedestal. The figure gestured toward it, then vanished like mist dissipating with the dawn. Claire stepped forward, heart-pounding. She opened the tome, pages yellowed and filled with cryptic text. Among strange symbols were words that seemed to pulse with life. The breathless are freed not by sound, but by understanding. As dawn broke over Blackwood Manor, the guests read their pasts, read the curse, and read their futures written in ink of redemption. By the time the sun painted the sky with golden hues, the guests gathered once more at the gates. Now they could speak, their voices clearer and fuller than before. They stepped outside together, aware that their retreat had been more than a weekend escape. It was a reckoning, a trial, and ultimately a rebirth. Blackwood Manor stood silent behind them, its secrets safe for yet another century, holding breath not just in its halls, but in the hearts of those who dared to uncover what lies beneath the soundless shroud. For more stories, like and subscribe.